Hi, welcome to my channel To Irrational. I'm Pranay Sharma, and in this video we are going to solve CM1 paper B conducted by IFoA Institute in September 2021. We are going to see detailed explanation of each of the questions, and if you want the answer sheet, you can WhatsApp or Telegram on this number shown below. And by chance, if you have received the answer sheet and question number 1 seems slightly different because I realized I made a mistake later on and I have corrected it. So the correct answer would be shown here and the answer provided in the answer sheet might be wrong. So let's get started. Let's see question number 1. A 1-year term assurance contract provides a death benefit of 100,000 payable at the end of the month of death to the life currently age 70 exact. Calculate the expected present value of the contract assuming a constant force of mortality, so CFM. Calculate the expected present value of the contract using the uniform distribution of death method. So here in the solution, for the convenience purposes, I have made the function bar a little bit bigger so that we can see the formula whenever we are referring to it. And I will use this section here to explain stuff, formulas mainly, whenever required. So here Q70 and I12 by 12 was given to us. I calculated I, but I did not use it. I calculated mu 70 in terms of constant force of mortality because our mu is going to stay constant, but it was not required as such. So in our CFM, what we say is that TPX for T being between 1 year would be nothing but our PX raised to T. So you could directly take it as 1 minus QX raised to T, or you can write it as E raised to minus mu T. This is what I have used here. You can definitely use this as well. So that ways I have calculated the TP70 here. That is going from time 0 to time t. So simply e raised to, you can see here I have e raised to minus mu and then just the time. Because our force of mortality is going to stay constant, so 1 by 12 px plus t will be nothing but e raised to minus mu into 1 by 12. So therefore 1 by 12 px plus qx plus t will just be 1 minus of e raised to minus mu by 12. So that is what I have used here to calculate my q values. It is exactly same for all years. Then our expected present value of benefit will just be the benefit amount into the discounting factor and probabilities of the previous times. Okay, so probability of survival, surviving time 0 and probability of dying within that particular month. For uniform distribution of death, as I said in the solution, you might have seen that I have made a mistake that I have corrected here. So first thing we'll do is our assumption. TQX must be equal to T into QX. QX is given to us and T we will take in years. Therefore, this column here, TQ70, will be month divided by 12 multiplied by the Q70 given to us. Similarly, I calculated the TP70, 1 minus of, and then I use this TP70 to calculate probability of survival in each month. For that, all I have to do is 1 by 12 P70 plus 11 by 12 for the last month would be nothing but probability that the person survived for the complete 1 year divided by probability that the person survived for 11 months from age 70. So using this divided by this, I got this value. You can see here. Then for Q values, I have taken 1 minus of these values. Now you can calculate all of these values in many different ways. I'm not saying that this is the only way, but finally we should get these as our answers. We should always get that our UDD value, expected present value, is lower. Why? We have to explain that in our second part. So the CFM assumes constant force of mortality, so the number of deaths decreases each month. Whereas in UDD, each month the number of deaths are equally distributed. So you have to understand here that because the number of deaths are increasing and total number of deaths throughout the year will remain same in both the cases. So therefore, for CFM, more deaths occur at the starting months and then it starts decreasing. Whereas for uniform distribution of death, the number of deaths remain same throughout. So therefore, at the end of the year, more deaths will occur for the UDD case. That means the payments are more in UDD case and they will be more discounted. That is what we have said here. Hence, the UDD has a higher expected cash flow at later months and lower expected present value because we are discounting more. Let's go to question number 2. Let's read question number 2. A couple are buying a house and have taken out a special first-time buyer's mortgage which allows for lower payments in the earlier years. The mortgage of 300,000 has a term of 30 years. For the first 6 months, no repayments are made, although interest still occurs on the loan. So for first 6 months, no payment, interest increases. Interest only repayment are due from this point until the end of third year. So the next 2.5 years we'll be paying only interest, so the loan amount will not increase. After the end of the third year and up to the end of the term, level repayments are due, set at a level such that the mortgage will be repaid in full at the end of the 30-year term. All repayments are made monthly in arrears. Interest is charged at an effective rate of 4.5% per annum. Calculate the amount of each monthly repayment without using a scenario solving tool such as goal seeker solver. So we cannot use goal seeker solver. So we have to use our traditional methods. So because for the first 6 months the loan was increasing, so our 300,000 1.045 raised to half will be the loan amount after 6 months, but later on we will be paying only the interest. Therefore, what happens is this loan amount stays the same at the end of the third year also when we start repaying our loan. So for calculating for the next 27 years, our loan amount must be equal to nothing but our A payable 12 times for 27 years into the 12x, x being the monthly repayment that we are paying. So using this, I have calculated the x to be nothing but our 300,000 1.04 raised to half upon this 12 into A 27 payable 12 times. So I have just calculated here A 27 payable 12 times using our traditional formula, and then here again I have just used this formula. So the monthly repayment that we get is 1620.83. In the second part, they say construct the loan schedule for the mortgage. So now we have to construct our loan schedule. We already have our, in the second part, we'll make our loan schedules in the given table. So I've created I12 by 12 because that would be our effective rate of interest. Next, our loan at the beginning will be 300,000. For the first 6 months, we will not have any repayment. So the interest will keep on increasing. Our interest would be our loan at the beginning multiplied by the effective rate of interest. I have kept that same throughout the column. Now because our repayment from time 7 to time 36 is going to be the interest only repayment, therefore all I had to do was take this value equal to this value. So that is why I have E13, and for the next one E14, and so on. I just said this is equal to this, and then I dragged it till 36. You can see this is the value we have. After that, we have our loan repayment of 1620.83 that I have taken from the previous sheet. Then make your capital repayment as you would for this. So you'll have repayment minus interest due, and that again goes on forever. It will not at all change, and our loan outstanding would be our loan at the beginning minus the capital repaid. And then loan at the beginning of the second year is just loan at the end of the first year, and all you have to do is drag all of them and make sure that you get almost a zero value at the end, and we get 0 here. It's a very small value, it's not exactly 0. In 2 decimal point it is giving us just a 0 value. For the third part, we have here the conditions of the loan permits borrowers to make additional payments in order to reduce the term of the mortgage. These additional payments can be made once each year, excluding the first. So first year we cannot make the payment, and later on we can make at the end of the year, subject to the maximum of 10% of the outstanding capital amount as determined at the beginning of each year. So the outstanding capital amount should be determined at the beginning of each year, but the payment would be at the end of each year. Correct. So the original repayment, including the repayment in the first 3 years, will not change, but the term of the mortgage will reduce. The original repayment schedule will remain unchanged except for the term. The couple decides to make additional payments to reduce the term of the mortgage as much as possible. So the maximum 10% of the payment would be done. Determine the shortest possible term that can be achieved in this way. So for the third one, all I did was copied the whole table from the second and pasted it here in the third, and made an column of additional payment. The additional payment would start at the end of the second year, but the payment would be 10% of the value at the beginning of the year. So at the beginning of the year, this is what our loan outstanding was. So 10% of that would be paid here. Once I make this, all I have to do is then repeat it. Each time the amount taken, the loan outstanding, was at the beginning of the year, and the payment was done at the end of the year. And for our loan outstanding at the beginning, we have to subtract our loan outstanding at the end with this additional payment. So I did that for all of them and searched for where our value becomes negative. So you can see here at this point our value becomes negative. So clearly our term will be 148 months. So I've written here 148 months, that is 12 years and 4 months. Now I don't care whether they will check our values till the end or not. You don't have to waste time in clearing the negative payments or anything. Leave it as it is. The important part was figuring out how much time will it require. So it is 12 years and 4 months. Let's read question number 3. An actuarial team has been tasked with building a model to evaluate the impact of a change in the interest rates of the value of a bond. A student in the team has constructed 2 models, Model 1 and Model 2. The results of the models are provided in Excel workbook in the question 3 Model 1 and question 3 Model 2 worksheet. Explain the limitations of each of the 2 models on the basis of the calculations and the results shown in these worksheets. You are not expected to validate the accuracy of the models, and you are not required to perform any further calculations. So we just have to comment by looking at these models. So let's see what is our model 1. In this model 1, you can see there is a detailed table where we have some cash flows, We have spot rates given to us that we can change whenever required, and this PV1 is nothing but PV01 is nothing but the rate of interest after this partial shift. So 1 base point, that is 0.01% change. You can see here. Okay, that is what we have here. Then they have calculated the present value using the spot rates given and the present value using this base shift. So we are shifting a small rate of interest in our spot rate and getting a new spot rate. Now we can definitely change different values of spot rate here, but the parallel shift is going to stay same. So either we will have 1% on one side or the other side, or maybe 2% or 3%, but it will be exactly same for each and every time period. Then let's look up to model 2. So in model 2, we have exactly the same bond, and how do we get these values is not part of our sheet here. It is using some VBA macros. And we just have the value in change, the change in market value. Okay, so we just have the final answer. We have to talk about the limitations of both of these models. So we are saying, as this model, first talk about the limitation of model 1. Now I have not talked about the, okay, I have definitely written here model 1, it should be model 2, right? So anyways, I have not talked about the advantages. I have just talked about either the differences or the limitations. So for model 1, as this model has an Excel table constructed according to bond A, it will be difficult to check different types of bonds that may have different coupon dates or frequencies. The parallel shift is assumed to be same for all months. We do not have a way to check different shifts at different months. Comparing multiple shifts is in the same page might be difficult because we have a lengthy table. So, comparing multiple shifts together might be difficult for us. Comparing different bonds for similar spot rates and shift will be not possible. So because comparing different bonds for similar spot rate, because we cannot change the bond, so we cannot see the effect on different kinds of bonds. Limitation of model 2, because model 2 we just have our final value, we don't even know what kind of calculation is done. So as this model only shows the final difference, the understanding the impact of term structure on the bond is not possible. Here we could see exactly for each of these spot rates how much is the change in the present values. Okay. The parallel shift is assumed to be same for all months. We do not have a way to check different shift at different months. So this is common for both of them. As the process of solving is not shown, compatibility with other types of bond is unclear. We don't know what happens if we change the bond. Comparing different bonds for similar spot rates and the shift will not be possible. It's exactly same for both of them. So two of these limitations I have taken exactly same. You can talk also about that they have not taken inflation into account. You can talk about big changes are not considered here. You can talk about negative shift is not taken into account. So you can say there will be a lot more limitations that you can write. So this is our last question 4. And here we have a life insurance company issues a 30-year unit-linked joint life endowment assurance policy to a man aged 32 exact and a woman aged 35 exact. So it's a unit-linked policy, but instead of giving it for one single life, they have made it into a joint life. Should either life die during the term of a benefit of 200,000 or the bid value of the unit, if higher, is payable at the end of the year of the first death. On survival of both lives to maturity, 102% of the bid value of the units is payable. On early surrender, the bid value of the units less a surrender penalty is payable at the end of the policy year of surrender. So here we will have some death cost, we will have some surrender profits, and we will have some maturity cost as well. So premiums which increase at a fixed rate each year are payable annually in advance throughout the policy or until the death of the first life. The premium structure as well as the mortality, surrender and pricing assumptions are set out in the question 4 base worksheet. Determine the unit fund cash flow for each year of the policy. So first we have to calculate unit fund, and later on we have to calculate our profit margin. So for unit fund, we do not care whether we are talking about single life, whether we are talking about joint life. So they have given our independent rates of mortality. We will take that in the next part. In the first part, that is not important to us. Even the surrenders are not important to us. What is important is the values given here. So our initial annual premium is said to be 6,000. The premium increases at the rate of this much. So we have increasing premium, with the first increase being applied to the second premium. The rate of growth, so this is our growth rate. Rate of interest, non-unit fund is also given to us. Expenses are given. Allocated premium, so we have 85%, 95% and then 100% from there on. Bid offer spread, management charges, risk rate, risk discount rate, and these are for a non-unit fund, we'll talk about later. So let's go and make our unit fund table. So the columns were already made. You could have changed a little bit, but you can keep it as it is. So value at the start 0, then we create our premiums. So first is 6,000, then next we will have increase of 1.5% and so on each year. So all you have to do is increase 1.5% from the previous one every single time. Allocated premium, first we had 85%, then we had 95% and then 100% from here. Bid offer spread, they said 4% of our allocated premium. So we have our bid offer spread here. Unit growth, you could have taken that as how our unit fund has grown at the end of the year before management charges, or here what I have done is I have just taken it as the interest that we have got or the growth that we have got in our unit. That's it. Okay, so you could treat this as our fund before management charges, or you could treat it as our interest. So I've treated it as interest, so this is our formula. Okay, so here all we have to do is add all these values. So value at the beginning plus the allocated premium minus bid offer spread into the growth rate. A lot of you might make bid offer spread negative and management charges negative. No problem. I use formula for positive and negative and keep all of these positive as it is. Then we'll deduct our management charges. It would be value at the start, allocated premium minus bid offer spread plus the growth rate into the management charges, that is 0.5%. And then value at the end of the year, we'll have to just this plus this minus this plus this minus this gets us this. For the second part, they have given us our independent decrements rates here, and we will be using that to find our dependent decrement rates. And also we will be making our profit testing table. So for rate of failure of joint life, we know that our TPXY must be equal to TPX into TPY, and if joint life ends, that is our TQXY would be nothing but 1 minus TPX into TPY. We'll use independent probability of survival from the tables given to us and make this particular formula. For the rate of surrender, we'll have to figure out whether the surrender is possible throughout the year or only at the end of the year. So in our base, you can see down here, we have surrenders are assumed to occur at the end of the policy year. So our AQ XY for surrender will just be 1 minus AQ XY for death into our APS, or actually P for surrender XY. So our dependent rate of surrender formula will be very straightforward. For survival probability, we'll just take 1 minus of probability of death minus probability of surrender. And then we have calculated our survival at the start of the year, that is our T minus 1 APX. Now I do go till the last value, but this is not required for our actual calculation ever. So you can only calculate till T minus 1. I go up till last value and does not really matter. For the profit testing table, you could make it in many different ways because no titles were given to us. So the unallocated premium and the bid offer spread comes from the unit fund table. Expenses given to us in our base, that is our 500 and 100. Commission also given in our base, that is 20% of our first premium and 2% of our second premium and all the subsequent premiums. Interest, we will have our unallocated premium plus bid offer spread minus expenses minus commissions into the rate of interest. Now again, you could take expenses and commissions as negative. I treat everything as positive and then make my positive and negative in the formulas whatever I would require. Let's talk about the death cost. So death cost only occurs when the payment would be given on death. That would be our guaranteed payment. So guaranteed payment of 200,000 minus the bid value would be paid by us if the bid value was less than 200,000. So simple formula would be nothing but we'll take the max of the 200,000 minus the bid value at that particular year or 0 multiplied by the probability of death, our dependent probability of death. For maturity cost, we are paying 2% extra on maturity. So for the value, we are taking 2% multiplied by the bid value multiplied by if both of them survive. So therefore 1 minus probability of death for both of them, we'll just multiply them. So we'll get probability of survival for both of them. For our surrender profit, our surrender penalty is again given in our base table here. You can see these are all our surrender penalty. We have already calculated the probability. Surrender penalty will be of our bid value. So for surrender profit, we'll say J11, that would be nothing but the probability of surrender multiplied by the base value, that is the surrender penalty value multiplied by the bid value. Management charges again comes from the unit fund table, and our profit will just be this plus this minus minus plus minus minus profit is plus and then plus, this becomes nothing but our profit. Profit signature would be our profit vector multiplied by T minus 1 APX, the ones that we have calculated here. Discounting factor would be according to the risk discount rate, and net present value will just be profit signature multiplied by our discounting factor. Then we have also calculated the expected present value of premium here, calculated the total, and our profit margin will just be NPV divided by expected present value of premium converted into percent rate, that would be 3.55%. So overall, the paper seemed very straightforward, but it was different from what we have seen before. If you found this video helpful, please like, share and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.